Gave us a bag of baby shit. Damn, man. All right, right there. Put your hand behind your back. I can't breathe. 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 Hey, boss. Hey, boss. Get on the ground!
For a busted tail light in the back, and the police he's covered.
This guy's still walking and following commands.
Not for taser, I think.
Got a feeling that's about to happen.
That looks like a bad dude too, to be honest with you.
Which way are they facing?
At least one they're facing westbound. I think he may have just been tasered.
Shots fired!
Ooh.
321, we have shots fired. We have one suspect.
Hey, I want to welcome everybody to another episode of You and the Law podcast show. One of the co-hosts of the show, Virgil Green, and as always, the bearded guy. Well, he's kind of cut down the beard a little bit, but he goes by the name of Chief Swaggy One. How you doing, brother?
I'm not doing good, Verge. I'm not doing good at all, man. We started another week of a tragic death of a young African American male at the hands of law enforcement, and wouldn't have mattered what ethnicity the officers would have been, but you would think that African American officers would understand the struggle that's been going on throughout the nation. So, living here in Memphis, man, is, everybody's bracing for the video. I think Chief Davis has done an amazing job of the video she put out today, asking for calmness. The families asked for calmness. The attorneys asked for calmness. The president of the United States has asked for calmness. So I truly believe that the city will be calm. I know there will be protests, but just heartbroken, man. Heartbroken as a former law enforcement executive to see that something like this in 2023, what's happening still.
Keith, and I think this is going to be a really good topic tonight, to have and for our listeners to join in because, Keith, one of the things that I'll say about this here is that the incident that happened with George Floyd, you got some of these same police officers probably, had comments about what happened in Minneapolis and the officers who were involved with that. And, they would probably never do that. I'm just speculating. But, the question I have, man, is, not to make this about race, but if we don't treat our own right, how do you expect anybody else to treat us?
Yeah, man, and you hate to say that because you
hate to say that, but
you don't want law enforcement to be painted as a black and white thing. That you need black officers in black areas and you need white officers in white areas. But you would think you're absolutely right. You would think these officers would have thought about that. It's what we talked about before, get caught up in getting emotionally hijacked and getting caught up in the moment. The fact that I dare you run from me. You run from me, you're going to pay the price. I've seen that occur throughout my career with law enforcement agencies. It goes to show you. I'm gonna talk about this a little bit. I don't want to be long, but it really breaks my heart that the profession that I got into 34 years ago, which was during the time of the Rodney King incident. We thought we had outgrown that, or got beyond that, and we haven't. And you get to thinking, is it narcissism? Is it sociopathic? Is it psychopathic? Is it just don't care? I mean, what causes someone to inflict that type of punishment on someone and then basically not render aid? So I think the listeners need to understand that in 2021, 2020, 2021, there was a requirement to put a duty to intervene policy into place. So officers who do not intervene and witness that are just as guilty as the officers who they're culpable, just like the officers who committed the heinous offense. And it just makes me sick of the stomach, man, see these young guys. And what I don't want to hear, Virgil, is I don't want to hear anything about, oh, they wouldn't do that, they're hurting. I don't want to hear anything about their we went back to their neighborhood and we visited with neighbors and stuff like that. I don't want to hear that, man. I'm so tired of hearing that. I don't know what to do. Yeah.
Well, and Keith, we haven't seen the video. I think we've seen images of the young man who died. But people are comparing the beating that he took to the beating of Rodney King in 1991. And, that was at the hands of 4 white police officers with multiple other police officers standing around watching what took place. And, right after the incident with George Floyd, correct me if I'm wrong, Keith, the Minneapolis Police Department came out with a much more directive on duty to intervene. And so you would think that we're just a little over 2 years from the death of George Floyd, that I don't care what race you are of a police officer, you would fully understand that, hey, we've got this policy in place, and I don't want to find myself in the same situation that those officers found themselves up in Minneapolis. It just, again, how do you, Keith, I know the video is going to be released, I believe, tomorrow. And I think hopefully people, some calmness will prevail, but I think emotions are going to be pretty high, Keith, when people see how these 5 black police officers treated another black male all over a traffic stop.
Yeah, and let me just say this, Virgil. What does it take to get through to law enforcement? And that's why I go back to, is it emotional hijacking? Is it narcissism? Is it sociopathic tendencies or psychopathic tendencies to know that you're on video, to know that you have a tool out there, to know that there are video cameras, cell phones, things like that have the capability of filming, and you still do things like that. You have to know. Just think about this. You have to know that video is going to be audited. That video is going to be reviewed by someone. That's why you have to really also be careful about having these specialized units, these street crimes units. I'm a big proponent of having those units. I think they do an amazing job. The departments that I've been a part of that we've had those have done amazing jobs. But you got to have the right people doing those jobs, because if you don't have the right people doing those jobs, they believe that they're above the law. And that's why I always say, as police chiefs and supervisors, you have to be extremely careful about what you say when you have these units. Phrases like happy hunting, phrases like by any means necessary, do whatever you need to do, zero tolerance, can inflame an ego. So if I've got an ego knowing that I'm not out here answering calls, I have an opportunity to help keep the city safe by putting some of the worst people in jail. And then that goes into it goes into your mindset, and it goes into your narcissistic mind, your narcissistic soul. Then, man, that's a disaster waiting to happen. And so it goes back, what's going through these guys' mind. And it doesn't take a rocket scientist, Virgil, and to the listeners to look at this young man, lying in his hospital bed. It doesn't tell you. You can see that he took a tremendous beating. Yeah, that's what we're gonna call it, a tremendous beating during this incident. And but I will say, man, I'm very impressed with Chief Davis. It doesn't surprise me. I've been knowing Chief Davis for years. I consider her a friend. It doesn't surprise me of her vigilance. It doesn't surprise me of her candor and as far as taking quick action. I have to say that I'm very impressed with the district attorney here, the Bureau of Investigation. I think, and we've all been in those departments that this would have been hanging for 6 or 7 months. Those officers would have been sitting at home collecting a paycheck, and the family would have still been grieving. So this gives the family opportunity to see that there is a zero tolerance when it comes to this type of behavior from officers, and Chief Davis is the right person for the job.
Yeah. Well, Keith, to go back to what you previously talked about, what's making these officers act out the way that they're acting out? You mentioned
even knowing there's body camera, Virgil, even knowing it's being captured. Yeah. What is? Yeah.
What is it? Keith, I think it's, for me, I believe it's, were these the right 5 guys? And I know information has been put out that none of these officers had any previous disciplinary problems. This is
doesn't
why
mean they hadn't done anything.
It doesn't mean,
They haven't done anything.
Exactly. And so this is why I'm a big supporter of having yearly psychological evaluations, or this is a part of your yearly performance evaluation, and not to where we make it's just a one-time deal, because as we've seen, officers go through a lot of stuff, and it's not all work related. It's not all, traumatic work related events, but you got to go back and ask yourself, were these 5 guys the right guys that should have been hired? Because what makes a man want to beat another man to the point to where when you look at that picture, you can't even see the man's eyes? Again, it's almost like you treat a dog better than you do a human being.
Well, I'll tell you, Virgil, it comes down to I'm not going to get caught. You mentioned earlier that these officers had pristine history as far as discipline, and I will tell you this: that doesn't mean anything, because that may be the fact that it may have not been reported. You have supervisors who may have thought that, we'll just talk to them and let it go. It may not have been and put it into an early intervention system, or also it may have not just been not investigated. Because think about it, man, there are a lot of citizens out here that believe they will not make a complaint to the police department because they believe that the investigation is not going anywhere. And there are those that fear retaliation. And so when I'd be interested, I'd really be interested, Virgil, to hear. And to the listeners, I'm speaking a lot about this because I've been involved in an organization that defends officers as much as they can, and basically they're going to try to make. And one thing I will say, another thing I'll say about CJ, have not heard one time them bring up this gentleman's past, whether he had a history or whatever. You have not seen him bring this up to make it seem like he deserves. So my hat's off to her. That's a major accomplishment right there. Yeah. But what I'd be interested in seeing, Virgil, is if I'd like to see these former officers' stats while they were in this unit, and what I mean by that, were they considered high producers? Were they out there making a lot of arrests, seizing a lot of dope? Because if that's the case, somebody pumped their heads up. And
it goes back to the supervisors.
It goes back to the supervisors. And so it's going to be interesting when they start digging in, because I really want to see what their performance was like. I'd really be interested to see what their performance was like since they, been in this specialized unit. Because everybody know right now, Memphis has a lot of violent crime, and I get it. I'm for. I have formed numerous of those units. Worked in the department. Arlington that has heat team, street crimes unit. Same thing in Lancaster, Norman, as recent as Little Rock, street crimes, VCAT, violent crime apprehension team. You got to have the right people in that. You have to, but it's just sad, Virgil, how they beat this boy, and they
But it just
and my thing is, man, it's just, and I know what I know what their defense is going to be. The defense is going to be, well, we sprayed him, and it didn't do any good, so we went to the next level, and it didn't do any good. So we had to do this. I already know what that defense is going to be. You know what that defense is going to be.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, and again, and I think just how the police chief has handled this investigation, and knowing that she has seen, she's seen the video, and for her to make the decisions to terminate these officers as soon as she saw that, not to say, well, typically you come out and you say, hey, this is under investigation, and you say the right things for the news media, but she took some steps immediately to remove these officers from the police department. And the fact that she hasn't said some of the things that we've seen other police chiefs say, knowing when these officers are wrong. Yeah. And so, and the thing of, I'm getting ready to play a video that's, a statement that she made to the public, because I think it's really important for people to understand, if you don't know the police chief, she's a mother, and she's a Black lady. And so, but she's in one of the highest positions with one of the major cities in the United States. But this isn't just about her making sure that the Memphis Police Department is trying to, checking the boxes.
Well, Virgil, let me say this before you go to the video. We all know we work for departments that have processes, civil service processes, that make it very difficult for police chiefs to be able to imminently handle these type of situations.
Yeah,
it can be done, and knowing CJ the way that I do, and knowing her work ethic, what I believe happened is that she basically said, every internal affairs investigator, this is what we're going to focus on. This is our priority.
Yeah,
this is our priority, and we are going to get this done because we got to keep this moving so this city will not be destroyed, or there won't be unrest in this city. So so it can be done. It can be done. The last prosecuting attorney that worked that was responsible for the city where I worked, this would have taken a year for him to review. Yeah.
Because it just appeared how slow the DAs actually. And one thing, Keith, I want to make this comment and get to some of the comments in the chat room, is that the longer you wait, now the community is just going to, that anger that the community has against the police and the city is just going to get worse. And now when you start having these protests that turns into violent riots, and you're sitting back saying, okay, well, we should have done this here. Well, now if you would have taken some real aggressive approaches to prevent this from happening, emotions are going to be high, but it's all in how you manage this. And it seems like the police chief and the prosecutor in Memphis are setting things up to say, hey, we're going to show you this video. Your emotions are going to be high. We want you to get out and protest, but do it peacefully. And you're going to have those who are going to take advantage of the situation, because you already know, Keith, Memphis is already a city that has a lot of crime going on. And it wasn't just so long ago that we actually talked about the shootings that took place back in Memphis, where this one guy had the whole city pretty much shut down.
The city on lockdown.
Yeah. And so, Keith, I want to get to two of the comments in the chat room. Veronica, she says,
Hey, Veronica.
how you doing? And I guess she hasn't, just obviously what she's seen on TV, but she totally says it's totally unacceptable. And kudos to the police chief. And Sonia Thomas out in San Diego, California, she says, I don't care how much crime they have. It took 5 men to beat one man. So bad. And I think that is the thing. How does 5 men, 4 men to beat one man to the point to where you can't even recognize this man in the hospital?
So let me and let me say something about Veronica. Veronica is a retired police executive from Miami-Dade, Florida. She and I have talked about things like that. She's very candid, and I truly respect her opinion and what she is saying. Same thing as me. That's one of the questions I would ask, man. Why did it take so many people to get him under control? I just want to know. I'm telling you what happened. He was probably, according to their words, being resistant. He was being
which is a famous word to use.
Yeah, and we feared for our safety, and this is what we had to do. That's going to be And
Keith, how can you fear for your safety of an unarmed man? Here you are. You got 5 men with weapons, with guns and tasers. How can you say that this one man caused you that much fear? If that one man can cause you that much fear, brother, you don't need to be wearing this uniform.
Well, Virgil, let me say this, and we've talked about this before. Is it possible? I mean, depending on the size of the person, depending on whatever, what other mitigating circumstances is going on with this person. I mean, I've seen officers have to fight a big guy. I've seen them.
This dude was little.
But you're taught to, let's get this under control. That's why we have the less lethal forms of force. The armed tactics. Now the taser has been probably one of the best, if it's not abused. If the usage of the taser is not abused and it's applied properly, it's probably one of the most effective tools that we have in law enforcement. And so the question is going to be, what did he do so bad for these results to occur?
Yeah,
for these end results. That's going to be the question. And I'm going to tell you right now, I don't think there's anybody in the city of Memphis. I don't think there's. But they're going to be those people that are going to say, well, he shouldn't have run. We're going to get these former police officers.
Yeah.
They're going to say, well, I'm sure he had done something, and why did he run? And he whatever. Man, we're not even going there because it doesn't justify that. No matter what, it doesn't justify.
It doesn't justify beating a man, and it doesn't justify when a man dies. You pretty much you murdered. Yeah.
And I don't feel bad for the charges filed against them. I don't feel bad that they were arrested. I don't feel bad that they have a high bomb. Matter of fact, I talked to a couple of officers today here in Memphis, man, that I know, and I'm telling you, these officers are pissed off.
Yeah, and Keith, let's make this point. I mean, this isn't the entire Memphis Police Department.
No, I'm telling you, these officers
are 5
guys. Yeah, these officers are pissed at these guys.
Yeah,
because they feel like they have gained so much trust in the community, as far as the community has not blaming the police department for any type of violence in the city. The police department has been supported. So now you come back after all this support about, we're not blaming y'all for the murders. We're not blaming y'all for the carjackings. We're not blaming y'all for that idiot that was driving around shooting people. We don't blame that. Y'all are doing the best y'all can.
Yeah.
Fast forward to last week. Now beat the hell out of a guy and he's dead.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Well, hey, Keith, I want to remind everybody who's tuning in to the podcast tonight. Our topic tonight is policing through human rights. And we're talking about the recent death of the young brother in Memphis, Tennessee. And Keith, I'm going to play a statement video that was released by the Memphis Police Department from the chief.
In light of the horrific circumstances surrounding the death of Tyre Nichols, it is absolutely incumbent upon me, your chief, to address the status of what the Memphis Police Department is doing, has done, and will continue to do in furtherance of finding truth in this tragic loss, ensuring we communicate with honesty and transparency, and that there is absolute accountability for those responsible for Tyre's death. As you know, 5 Memphis police officers were terminated last week. These officers were found to be directly responsible for the physical abuse of Mr. Nichols. Concurrent within that investigation, other MPD officers are still under investigation for department policy violations. Some infractions are less egregious than others. As this investigation and other external investigations continue, I promise full and complete cooperation from the Memphis Police Department with the Department of Justice, the FBI, the Tennessee Bureau of Investigation, and the Shelby County District Attorney's Office to determine the entire scope of facts that contributed to Tyre Nichols' death. Aside from being your chief of police, I am a citizen of this community we share. I am a mother. I am a caring human being who wants the best for all of us. This is not just a professional failing. This is a failing of basic humanity toward another individual. This incident was heinous, reckless, and inhumane. And in the vein of transparency, when the video is released in the coming days, you will see this for yourselves. I expect you to feel what the Nichols family feels. I expect you to feel outrage in the disregard of basic human rights, as our police officers have taken an oath to do the opposite of what transpired on the video. I expect our citizens to exercise their First Amendment right to protest, to demand action and results. But we need to ensure our community is safe in this process. None of this is a calling card for inciting violence or destruction on our community or against our citizens. In our hurt, in our outrage and frustration, there is still work to be done to build each other up, to continue the momentum of improving our police and community relationships and partnerships, to show those who watch us now that this behavior is not what will define our community and our great city. This is not a reflection of the good work that many Memphis police officers do every day. What comes next is our defining moment. What we all do next can be that reflection of our character. I am not wavering in my commitment to you to have a police force that is here to serve and protect you. Those 5 officers and others failed our community, and they failed the Nichols family, and that is beyond regrettable. I have met with and offered condolences to Tyre's mother and father, and have asked for the support of our community leaders and clergy in this extremely difficult moment. But words are only temporary salves that need to be followed by true, responsible action and change. It is my intent as a proactive measure to ensure that a complete and independent review is conducted on all of the Memphis Police Department's specialized units, and the commitment of my executive leadership to ensure that policies and procedures are adhered to in our daily encounters with the citizens we are sworn to serve. In the days ahead, I ask that you continue to pray for the family of Tyre Nichols, the Memphis Police Department, and our great city.
You know, Keith, I think it was really important for everybody to hear the Chief Davis statement if they haven't heard it. Several things stuck out to me, and I'll turn it over to you. One of the things when I was putting this, we were talking about, our topic for this week, and, you come up and suggested, policing through human rights. the one thing that she mentioned in her statement was human rights. Something that so many police officers have totally ignored and totally forgot about is another person's basic human rights, and the fact that they, you know, again, there are just so many things I can say, brother, but it's sad that we are once again here after what happened with in Minneapolis with you know, and it's just sad, man, that we are still dealing with police officers who just egregiously just don't respect another person.
Virgil, we're still dealing with the era of I fear for my safety. We're still dealing with the era of, well, you know, they resisted. We're still dealing with that era where you only had to say those words and everything was okay. We've gotten to a point now where saying those words are not good, or don't make you have give you carte blanche to do whatever you want to do, and that's what's making people so mad as far as the unions and things, because now you all aren't running police departments, you all aren't getting in front of the community, telling the community, well, we represent, we are supportive of with this officer and things like that. But we're looking at that era. We're still in that era where that has been prevalent for years in law enforcement. It's going to be hard for us to get out of that. CJ said something that I mentioned earlier. When you start having these specialized units where you have to be really careful, when you start having units like SWAT and bicycle units and bomb squads, if you don't put those guys in check or put systems in place, you're creating a bunch of prima donnas. And what I mean by that is that they believe that they're above. I mean, I've seen those units not even talk to your average police officer, street officer, because they've been selected to go out here and do the things that apparently the street officers were unable to do. So now you're building egos. So when you build an ego, I can do whatever I want to do. Yeah. And it goes back to that fact, man. Hey, we're all going to get our story together. I guarantee you there was some of that. Hey, we're going to get our story together. This is what happened. This is this, blah, 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 blah. It's going to be interesting. But until that era of, and that's why you hear me say hashtag purge the profession. We got to start purging the profession, man. We got to start purging it. We have to.
Yeah. Well, and Keith, one of the things that I'll say, man, I think, when these unions come out and defend the officers, everybody has the right to due process. And I think this is why the public, you got the police, we continue with this narrative. It's us against them. And when a person has lost their life, you need to stop it with this. It's us against them. I don't care if you're black or white. And in this situation, I'm even more upset because you got 5 black officers who didn't give a damn about beating another black man. And it goes to show you, and I'm going to say this, Keith, I may be wrong, but if those 5 black officers did that and it's them, can you imagine if they would have just stood by and watched another white officer beat this guy and not said anything?
How do we know they haven't?
Well, yeah, we don't know they haven't, but I'm going to say this, Keith, another thing. I know there's still a lot more to this investigation. And as Chief Davis said, that there's still others that are going to face some disciplinary issues, maybe not as severe as some. But I also go back to the supervisors. At the end of the day, you got sergeants or you got lieutenants or you got captains. There is a chain of command that these guys report to, and you can't tell me that somebody didn't see something. And some of these officers were fairly new, and that's another disturbing thing. I think 2 of the officers had hadn't been on the department less than 5 years.
Virgil, let me say this, and I'm getting so damn tired of people saying they're young. Not you, but people saying they're young. You cannot make me believe this is the first time this has happened. You cannot make it believe that there was no supervisor that has never spoken with them about their actions.
Correct.
You can't make me believe that there was something in the academy that stood out to where it would have raised an eyebrow that, hey man, something ain't right here.
Correct.
There's nothing you can do to make me believe that because you and I have lived that. We have lived that, knowing that this profession allows for that type of behavior. And for CJ to come out and say she must listen, knowing the type of person that she is, her Vera Bumpers, the female leaders that know Crystal Young Haskins, Renee Hall, knowing the type of leaders, Letitia Watson, knowing the type of leaders these ladies are, they're not going to get on TV and have to do something. If she got there and said it's horrendous, that's period, point blank. There's no room for her to make an error. For her to say that, for her to act and say it must be bad.
Yeah.
For her to make that decision. And the thing about it is if we could get our unions to understand that when these officers commit these type of heinous crimes, and the longer we allow them to stay on the streets, or we allow the cases to stay open, we are lighting the fuse to a powder keg that's going to explode at some point.
Well,
because the longer you allow these investigations to go on, the community is going to form their own opinion. So now what's saying is now you guys are conspiring, hey man, behind the scenes, the chief, the prosecuting attorney, and the union are conspiring, and nothing's going to happen to this person. And so even if it's a legitimate use of force, and it determines that not this situation, but even just take a hypothetically, if it's a legal use of force, authorized use of force, okay?
Yeah.
But you've waited a year to do anything about it. That's a powder keg, man. Because there's no way you're going to convince the community that this was not a conspiracy. Hats off to her for them addressing this. It happened on the 7th. This is the 26th. She fired them last week. Less than 2 weeks after that happened, they were gone. They were history. They were former officers. I commend her for doing that.
Yeah. Well, Keith, and this is the thing that concerns me. And, you've got some officers who probably say, oh, hey, she was wrong. They had their, due process. But I think the thing that is what people need to understand, how many more times do we need to go back and look at what happened in Minneapolis, what happened in Ferguson, what happened in all these other cities?
Virgil, let me say this. Isn't it amazing how people who have never been above the level of a line officer can tell us can tell us how we need to do our job and what's right? Isn't that amazing?
Yeah,
and
it is.
Ask them why they make it seem like they know more than you, but it's a damn shame that we have to worry about individuals who they're not even supervisors, man.
Yeah.
Okay.
And you got, and same thing with people in the public who think they know a lot about policing, and because they know they've got friends or they are, their neighbor is a police officer, so they've some kind of way formed that this opinion that, hey, the police officers know more than the police chief do. The police chief, you don't know anything. Everything that you're doing involves the politics of it. And it's not the politics. No, it's holding people accountable, just like how Chief Davis.
Well, Virgil, I'm telling you, going through that situation back in 2019, when I terminated someone, and it was the union put out the message that I was hired to specifically do that.
Yeah.
So bottom line is I don't have, I can't make my own decisions. I don't worry about that. That's their right to think that. At the end of the day, when you murder somebody, and what I mean by murder, there was no reason or no
justification.
threat towards your life. You had less lethal opportunities.
Yeah.
That's just murder. And we were just here in Minneapolis not too many months ago, maybe a year ago, when they saw. But do you not think that would deter you?
And that's what I was going to say, Keith. Wouldn't you think, as a police officer, that something like that you saw over and over again, of a man kneeling on a man's neck for how many, almost 8 minutes, that is something that you don't want to put yourself in the position of? And it goes to show you that there are so many police officers, and again, we got to say not all, but there are some who totally ignore the rights of another person.
Well, Virgil, there are some that believe because they didn't use a gun, because they haven't pulled the trigger of a gun, it's not murder. They feel as though you can't murder somebody, or you can't. It's not. I'm telling you in the audience, there are officers out there believe that deadly force only occurs with a firearm.
Yeah. Well,
They
deadly.
believe that.
Well,
They
when
believe
you
that's the only way it can occur.
Well, when you murder somebody, beating somebody, and then when one of the videos I showed opening up the podcast is the shooting that took place in South Carolina, where you had the unarmed guy running from the police officer, and he shoots him in the back. Again, and that probably would have never came out if it hadn't been for a citizen, in the area recording the incident on his cell phone. So again, Keith, it just, like you stated earlier, is it narcissistic? Is it just, what is it? Is it something within this person's being unstable? What is it that's making these guys anger get to the point to where they can't stop? And Keith, let me take you back to a video that we talked about on the podcast show, where a white female police officer grabbed her sergeant and pulled him away from how he was being aggressive with a person that was being handcuffed. And that sergeant grabbed that female officer by her throat. That right there shows you that there are a lot of police officers dealing with a lot of mental issues. And, we'll say, well, we'll send you to go get a checkup and then you can come back. Man, if you see something like that, personally, I'm going to do everything I can to make sure that I separate you from the police department.
Man, I told you, man, it's arrogance, it's narcissism, it's sociopathic and psychopathic, all rolled up into one. I'll just put all of it in a cup, put some form of hot liquid in it, drink it like tea. There are some people that do that, and I don't, man, I'm not a person that is a loss for words at times, but I cannot answer that question when people ask me why. It's the same. I have the same response. I don't know, and I have to, try to tie it to some of those things that we talked. I just said a few minutes ago. But overall, man, I don't know why. I can't answer it. I don't know why. But I'm telling you, man, for her to go on TV and for the district attorney to go on TV, this must be pretty bad. It's got to be pretty bad.
Yeah. Well, Keith, I'm going to show a news clip of what took place. Well, not what took place, but of what this young man looked like from his hospital bed.
Unreleased body cam footage from Memphis, Tennessee reportedly shows appalling footage of police beating a man during a traffic stop. It happened on January 7th when Tyree Nichols was pulled over and then allegedly tried to run from police. Viewers of the body cam footage say he was beaten by officers for 3 minutes. Nichols' family attorney saw the footage today.
He was defenseless the entire time. He was a human pinata for those police officers.
Nichols died in the hospital. Days later, all 5 officers involved in the incident, who are also African American, have been fired from the Memphis Police Department.
You know, Keith, and I think, you know, when you sit there, when you look at the images of this young man, you know, at what point did somebody out of the 5 say stop? It shouldn't have even got that far because it was a traffic stop. He wasn't too far from his home. He ran from the police. And Keith, and I'll say this, and I think, you know, if you are, for anybody else who saw what happened in Minneapolis, who have seen what happened in Memphis, who've seen what happened in so many other cities, wouldn't you be afraid of the police?
Hell yeah.
I mean, there are other police officers. There are other police officers who are afraid of other. We talked about this on the podcast. There was a Kansas City officer who was a detective who was in uniform. He said that, hey, I didn't know what these guys were capable of doing. He feared for his safety.
And the sad thing about it, man, 98% of the officers out here do the right thing.
Yeah.
98%. There's
98%.
18,000 law enforcement agencies in the nation, in the United States. Over 1 million police officers in the United States. Now, think about that. Think about the small number that tarnishes the reputation and the name of, and tarnish the badge in the name of law enforcement.
Yeah.
Less than 2%.
Yeah, less than 2%. And that less than 2% has caused a lot of cities to, you know, to have major protests, violent riots, and it's caused their cities to settle an enormous amount of money from these lawsuits because of their actions.
Virgil, I was reading something one day that said the city of Chicago over a 10-year period of time, and I want to say, I don't want to quote it wrong. I'm gonna just based on what I can remember, from 2010 to 2018, had settled for like close to $500 million in settlements.
You're pretty close. I remember
$500 million in settlement in a 7-year period. There are actually police departments throughout the nation that when they have certain situations like this, you have a team that will reach out to the victim or the families and say, hey, we want to settle this. When it comes to that, man, that's pretty bad. When you know that when you have to budget a certain amount of money because you know the history of your organization and you're going to have to, that's a sad thing. And it's not anything pointing the blame at anybody in particular, but when that happens, you know, when you've got to walk around with a blank check, knowing when you have to bring an attorney in of the stature of Ben Crump, when you see Ben Crump, it's bad.
It's bad. Yeah, and you know, and people have their opinions about Ben Crump, especially when these high-profile police. And this wasn't a shooting. There was actually, you know, this man died at the hands of police officers. You know, he shows up and, you know, and things happen. So as you stated, when he shows up, or Al Sharpton shows up, you know, it's pretty bad. You know, Keith, and I want, you know, for those who are just now tuning into the podcast, our tonight's topic is policing through human rights. And if you miss any parts of this broadcast or this podcast, you can check us out on our YouTube page at You and the Law. You can check us out on Spotify, Anchor, Google Podcasts, Amazon Music Podcast now. So if you go to Amazon and you're searching for something, go in and type You and the Law Podcast and listen to our podcast show while you're buying whatever you're buying off of Amazon. So Key, you know, I've been looking for a juicer, man. And so as I'm looking for a juicer, I typed in our podcast and listened to the podcast show.
Why are you looking for a juicer?
You know, man, to be healthy. 2023 is going to be a healthy year.
For you, let me just tell the listeners, I heard the same conversation in 2019, 2020, 2021.
Here you go, man.
Matter of fact, let's go back to 2011. I had that. But Virgil, let me just say this, man. I love my profession, man. It's been good to me.
Yeah.
But this is just this is heartbreaking. This is heartbreaking, man. This really is. Well,
and you know what, Keith, and I think, you know, with the topic policing through human rights, and I think this is something that, you know, we need to have these conversations at our ICP conferences, at our Noble conferences. Policing through human rights. Have we gotten away from, you know, we can train on every single thing on how to use deadly force, how to take somebody down. But we spend, you know, hours and hours on that. And we might spend maybe 4 hours, maybe 6 hours, maybe 8 hours talking to officers about, making sure you don't violate somebody's civil rights. I just don't think that we spend enough talking about human rights of individuals and making sure that we're doing a much better job of policing now than what was being done in 1960s.
Well, Virgil, I think we do a lot of, going back, and I know we're coming toward the end, but yeah, I've said this before in some of the talks that I've done. We as law enforcement do a really good job of teaching our officers how to shoot.
We
spend a lot of money on that. We spend a lot of money on teaching them how to take a lot of time and effort on teaching them how to take down
people,
bad guys.
Yeah.
And we spend a lot of time getting our officers' minds to everybody out here wants to kill you, or a lot of people out here are bad guys.
Yeah.
This is what you need to do to survive. You got to go home every day.
Correct.
A lot of us have bought into that. A lot of these youngsters have bought into that. And so what happens is that when you do encounter somebody, when you teach that, that's all you hear, okay? And you hear that. So then when you come in contact with someone who is somewhat resistant, or what you believe is resistant, then it goes back into that fight or flight, and you're going to fight. Because as a police officer, you don't run from anybody. You don't run. You stay in the fight. You go to an academy, they're going to say, you stay in the fight. You don't give up. Stay in the fight.
Yeah.
Stay in the fight. Don't give up. You can't say that to everybody. You can't put that scenario in everybody's mind.
Correct.
You cannot. And another thing we do not do is we focus only on our state laws. We just skim over what federal laws are, civil rights violations. So to the listeners out here, even by some means, these former officers are cleared on state charges, I can guarantee you they will not be cleared on
federal charges,
violation charges.
Yeah.
So which is a whole totally different jurisdiction. So, people will hear that, but I will tell you, man, I've said this before. You cannot continue to teach our officers the way we teach them and make them paranoid or put them in fear that every situation they go into is going to require them to use force, and not focus on de-escalation. Everything is escalation. Everything. We're not telling officers we're not teaching officers to be cautious. we're teaching them to be afraid and to be paranoid.
Yeah. Well, and Keith, and I mentioned this earlier about holding supervisors accountable. You hit people where it matters. And that means if you got to lose your job, then you know what? That's what happens. Because at the end of the day, this probably wouldn't have happened if there had been better oversight or some supervisors holding these guys accountable. And it sounds like there were more than just these 5 officers who were involved, because as Chief Davis stated in her statement that there's others that are under investigation. They may not face as severe penalties as being terminated. But again, Keith, and I think when you start holding people accountable, some of this stuff will stop. And I think then you have people, well, now you just, you're scaring people. They don't know how to get out here and do their job.
Right.
If you're working on a specialized unit like these guys probably were, get out here and do what you're supposed to do, but don't get out here and violate somebody's human rights.
Well, I'm telling you, Virgil, when you taught that everybody out here is a bad person, everybody who lives in a certain geographical area is a bad person, everybody who has a certain socioeconomic level is a bad person. You're taught that. You're taught shoot. You're putting all this money into ammunition and stuff, and you're not putting money into de-escalation. This could be the end result.
Yeah. And Keith, you bring up, the firearms, everybody says, hey, if you don't score a certain percentage, you don't qualify, you can't carry a handgun. But we put so much emphasis on that and not teaching officers the basic laws of human rights and how you
fire officers get fired if they can't shoot.
If they can't shoot. But we don't fire them if they go out here and violate somebody's civil rights.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Well, hey, Keith, man, we're coming to the last minute of the podcast, man. It's been another great topic. Man, we'll as next week we'll definitely come up and have another informative topic to talk about.
Right. Well, Virgil, I'll tell you, man, we're going to pray for the family, pray for the peace in this city. And I'm going to pray that we don't have to have this discussion anymore this year.
Yeah. Well, Keith, and I think, next week, man, I think we're going to be talking about, the mass shootings that we continue to see.
Yeah.
So, but hey, we want to thank everybody for tuning in tonight, joining us. Make sure you tune in next Thursday on You and the Law podcast show at 6 p.m. Central Standard Time on Facebook Live. Have a good night.